All right, everyone, welcome back into another Prize Picks and Underdog video. Going to be touching on the top prop bets that we have available in Week 12. Let's go ahead and get into it. But as always, let's go ahead and get into a recap of the previous slate. The previous slate being Thanksgiving, ended up going 5 for 6, so close to giving you guys a 6 for 6 slip. Jake Ferguson had a catch that he almost made. It was a tough catch, but almost made it. Still a good day. Can't really complain. A strong day as a whole. And hopefully we can do that again on this slate. Now, it is post-Thanksgiving weekend and whatnot. I guess technically still Thanksgiving weekend. That's why I'm coming out with this video a little bit later. It's not going to be the deep dive. It's going to be just some quick hitters here. I do want to call it the Bears here for the receiving snaps. Roschon Johnson and St. Brown are kind of being undervalued, especially if someone like EQ gets more snaps. I think there's a good chance that he gets about 50% of the snaps in this game. Thus, I do think he'd be a good bet to get the over receiving yards there. And then Roschon Johnson, they have been trying to get him involved in the passing game. So both two decent props there. I'd be fine with that. Right here, we got a push as a prop projected at 9 for tackles and assists, and that's what the data is telling us as well. Do you want to call Devin Singletary for under 11 for a fantasy score? Seemingly a pretty darn good prop that we're getting, and it's weird because over the last 2 weeks he's been someone that's been popping up really well for us for the over fantasy score. Obviously this is pretty much dependent on the fact that Dameon Pierce is expected to be back. The question is, how much of a workload can we expect Pierce to get in this game? It's a big question. You know, Wayne's been on the field. He's looked good. Devin Singletary just having a full workload in this offense meant that he was the player that when the holes were there, he was able to take advantage of it. I haven't seen anything different. I would still say actually Pierce has been the better of the two running backs, although you can't deny Singletary was able to take advantage of those last two matchups. Pretty awesome. Again, I don't know if there's a big difference there. Obviously, they're probably going to try to ride the hot hand a little bit more. Might be a little bit risky there, but all in all, if he doesn't score a touchdown, probably not going to get his over fantasy score there. So I'd be fine with betting the under there. We continue on. Chris Moore for under 1.5 receptions is seemingly a good one there as well for Tennessee, which does worry me because if we look at Chris Moore's snaps, they have been pretty high lately, and especially with Treylon Burks still out, definitely a concern to me. I don't know if I really want to go in on that, but we do know the offense for the Titans, especially against Carolina, they are going to try to rush the football a bunch with Derrick Henry. He's probably going to get around 20 total rushes in this game. So someone like Chris Moore, who isn't exactly someone you're trying to get the football to, going out of your way to get him the football, I could agree with that. I could agree with betting the under there. And Carolina's defense has been pretty darn good at stopping the pass. And then one that would correlate well with that as well, you got Westbrook here for under receiving yards as well. He's someone that we can expect to have a bad game. And I would want to find a Derrick Henry prop that we could pair with that. And it's funny that we're getting a push prop for Henry for under 2 receptions, which all I don't mind. But again, we got another one with Okonkwo. So to me, I'm seeing that we might have a decent stacking opportunity for Tennessee. And so we take a peek at the props that we're getting for Tennessee. For Okonkwo, I'd be fine betting the less than. Okay. That being said, this should be a game in which Will Levis actually has a decent game because they're going to be able to establish the run. We saw in his first start against the Atlanta Falcons. Why was he successful? Because they were able to establish the run. He was very good on the play actions. He was very good at getting the ball to receivers on one-on-one situations. But at the same time, the Falcons were really selling out to stop the run. That's probably going to be what happens again today against Carolina. So I guess if Will Levis has a good game, it wouldn't be shocking. At the same time, I don't think we would want to bet on it, especially in this scenario. So yes, Okonkwo for less than fantasy score, I'm fine with that. Chris Moore for under receptions, I'm fine with that. Heck, Derrick Henry for over fantasy score, I'd be fine with that as well. If you guys want to do something like rush attempts, I feel like that's going to be a good one. Obviously, game script dependent. We're betting on the Titans keeping the game close. And so I think the rush attempts might be the best, but really all of these should be pretty good. And you look at the last time where they were really truly successful rushing the football, it was Pittsburgh and then also Atlanta. And so that's where I'm saying, like, any of these props, if you want to do rush plus receiving yards, that's fine. It's probably going to get some work in the passing game. We see the prize picks line set at 2. I'm fine with that. And then like Will Levis, you could then probably bet the under fantasy score as well. And so that's a decent stack that we have. I think that's going to correlate pretty well. You're going to have to adjust maybe which ones you go in on because there's going to be a payout shift. So whichever few of those prop bets that you think are going to be the best, roll with it. Then continuing on, we got James Cook for under fantasy score. I don't know what to do with that, guys. James Cook had by far his best game this season, I think, in the last game, and it took a while to get going, but he also has a difficult matchup going against Buffalo. And so all in all, I would probably say, yeah, he does get less than this, but I like the fact that he was involved in the passing game. That is something that should have been happening throughout the season, and it did happen again last week. Now, the Jets, Denver, those are two of the easier matchups, especially at the tail end of the season for him. The Eagles, yeah, all in all, he's probably going to struggle struggle. He's probably not going to score a touchdown. So I probably would be agreeing with the under there. So we got a few decent under fantasy score props. We also are seeing Dalton Kincaid for under fantasy score. I don't know if I exactly want to roll with that. It's going to be up to you guys. Evan Ingram we're seeing for over fantasy score at 10.5. That's a decent one. This game that we have with Houston and Jacksonville is supposed to be a pretty high scoring game. You got Evan Ingram in a pretty smash spot as well. He has been someone that you can rely on in terms of targets, and the production for the most part has been there. Given the fact that it's going to be a slightly easier matchup, the targets are still going to be there. The snaps are still going to be there. I'm perfectly fine with betting the over fantasy score. I don't think Zay Jones being active or inactive really changes Evan Ingram's role. And given the matchup, I'm perfectly fine betting the over for him. Yeah, Dalton Kincaid, I don't know if I really want to touch too much. Let's continue on here. Jalen Hyatt, under 5 for fantasy score is certainly interesting. He can get there in one play. I will say I do think someone like Saquon Barkley will have a good game, but really I think there's such a high correlation between games that Barkley has that are good games and the whole offense is decent as well. So that is another decent stacking opportunity going against New England. If they can hinder the production for Saquon Barkley, the whole offense is going to struggle. We saw that last year. If you look at like Saquon Barkley in terms of like who's the most valuable for their team, it's Saquon Barkley. And I'm including like Patrick Mahomes in that. Like the way that him being healthy or not healthy changes the whole dynamic of this offense is crazy. Like Tommy DeVito had a pretty good game against Washington, don't get me wrong, but I think that was solely because not solely, but a majority of it was because Barkley had himself a very good game and eye-popping plays. So I think there's a good chance Barkley has a good game here. But again, if you don't think so, bet the opposite of that, because I do think that the offense would just struggle as a whole there. Continuing on, Cade Otton for less than 7.5 for a fantasy score. Perfectly fine with that. Jerome Ford, this one's extremely interesting. I'm worried about his snaps being reduced a little bit, which to me, I would say is a mistake. But we saw Strong be back in that game. Now, he only played 4% of the snaps, but when Strong is playing, those come with Ford getting those snaps taken away. And so that is a concern to me if we see Strong get more work like he had in previous weeks. You know, he had a couple weeks in there where he had about 30% of the work. That is a concern for me. Now, this is a smash matchup. You would expect him to get a lot of work. You'd expect Kareem Hunt to get a lot of work. I don't know if I exactly want to touch that. We are seeing a decent stacking opportunity for Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid for under their fantasy score, as well as James Cook. You got 3 under fantasy scores that correlate pretty heavily there, and the data is telling us to bet the under there. I'm perfectly fine with that. Then another one that I actually don't mind in that same game would be Devonta Smith for over his fantasy score. This is one of the ones that I felt was the best prop bet on their last game, was Devonta Smith for over his fantasy score. That ended up hitting, and I think we're going to see him get a little bit more of a concentration in the target department with Dallas Goedert still out. And so that's a decent game stacking opportunity. We can bet the under for Dalton Kincaid. I don't love that. Obviously, he's been pretty good lately. Under for James Cook. Again, don't love that, but that's kind of what the data is telling us. So more times than not, I'm going to trust the data. And then Josh Allen for under fantasy score as well. Again, kind of ugly. I get that, but the data is telling us to do that, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm perfectly fine than just doing a Devonta Smith stack the other way. We did see DeAndre Swift for over receiving yards. If you guys want to toss that in there, is a decent one as well. Then continuing on, guys, we are getting some decent tackles and assist props. You know, I'm perfectly fine with using these as like good EV bets. Definitely want to be targeting those. We do see Trevor Lawrence for over pass attempts as well at 34. Again, that game has a decent chance to be a shootout. I would say if you are doing the Evan Ingram over fantasy score, this would be one that probably correlates pretty well with that. Russell Wilson over fantasy score. I don't know if I really want to touch that one. That's one that's kind of popping up there as well. But yeah, a decent day in terms of the props that we are getting. I do just want to call out, like, Shaheed had a bunch of targets in his last game with Michael Thomas being out. I think he should be able to get at least 5 targets in this game. Yeah, we're going to see his snaps go up. Now, I don't want to say that's a guarantee that his snaps go up, because A.T. Perry was the one that stepped up, and he literally just looked like Michael Thomas. But we did see Shaheed did get a little bit more work in that game as well. Now, they were playing from behind. It's tough to really gauge why Perry got snaps or why Shaheed got snaps. I'm assuming it's going to be because they were playing from behind, obviously, but like who's going to be the one that actually gets the biggest bump in snaps? I wouldn't be shocked if Shaheed continues the same role, but at the same time, he probably will get a slightly higher usage, especially with Derek Carr projected to be back. That being said, I do think A.T. Perry, one of those two, is going to have a pretty good game. And you know, he looked really good. And so I really don't mind A.T. Perry for over his receiving yards as well. Now, there was one that was popping up earlier on this week. It was Justin Watson for over 6.5 for a fantasy score. It might have actually been lower than this. That's probably why. Okay, it was at 5.5. Okay, I just checked. That was a bet that I already made. I was going to call that out. So yeah, probably a little bit too thin now. He has kind of been the receiver one the last 2 weeks. Mahomes seems to trust him. I don't really blame much of the drops he had on him, honestly, in the last game. A lot of them were just kind of extending your hands too much and in the rain. If anyone that's caught passes with gloves on in the rain, that's just going to happen. It just sucks when it does. But yeah, that 6.5 probably a little bit too thin. And then before I get into the bet of the day, just showing you guys the other prop bets that we were getting elsewhere. Underdog really like James Cook for over fantasy score. That is seemingly a very strong bet that we have. Tyler Boyd's an interesting one where Underdog seems to be overvaluing him, whereas opposed to PrizePicks, they seem to be undervaluing. Seems to be a decent middling opportunity there. I'd be fine betting both of those. Jake Browning, you know, he wasn't terrible. And I do think that the offense can at least be somewhat the same as what it was in terms of getting the ball to the playmakers. Now, obviously, the ceiling's capped, but, you know, I'm kind of fine with that. And then just some other ones. Kyler Murray under fantasy score. Don't exactly love that. The better bet would actually probably be on PrizePicks for the under there. All in all, not that great. Jerry Jeudy, I'm fine with betting the under there. I'm fine with that. Seemingly decent one. Trey McBride over fantasy score. He should get a heavy allotment of targets with Michael Wilson out. So really, we're seeing James Cook and Trey McBride for Underdog. I think I'm really like those two prop bets for the over fantasy score. Definitely okay with those. Deontay Johnson, I would hope, would have a better game in this game, so I'd be fine with his over fantasy score as well. So, you know, a decent amount of good prop bets here for Underdog. Let's go on and get into the PrizePicks bet of the day. And so here we go, guys. I'm literally just going with the ones in which the data sheet's telling us to bet. I'm okay with that. I think that's going to be the good way to go. I will show you guys a couple of stacks that you could run out that I mentioned. So here's the first one where, you know, a little bit of a game stack with that Philly-Buffalo game. Don't exactly love it. Obviously, it's supposed to be a decently high-scoring game, and I don't love the fact that probably, besides Diggs, they're next three best, most likely scorers, I'm betting the under on. Now, early on in the week, Khalil Shakir was a good over fantasy score prop bet. So maybe that has something to do with it. And then I do think Devonta Smith is one that I want to be going in on. And then I did mention this one as well. You know, with Tennessee, I feel like we do have some correlated stacks that we can run out. Now, I do worry that the play action could be, you know, a big part of the passing game in this game because they are going to be able to establish a run. So definitely concerned there, but I do think Derrick Henry should have a good game. We saw the data really likes these three right here. And so with that, I'm fine tacking on Will Levis for under fantasy score. You probably don't need to include this because the payout shift is too great. And so I'd actually be fine with just these four and then tacking on maybe two of your other favorite prop bets. I went with St. Brown. I do feel like that's probably the best bet that we have. I am saving that, though, for the Monday night video that I'll come out with probably later on tonight. That's going to be all for this video. Again, apologies for the late video, but Thanksgiving schedule, it happens. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. Do appreciate that, guys. Let's have a good slate. If you guys want access to this cheat sheet, is available for just $10 a month. Thanks for watching. Let's have a good slate. And as always, let's keep cashing.